For Creamer Media's Polity, I'm Shannon de Rehove. Author and analyst William Gumede joins me to discuss his latest book, South Africa in BRICS, Salvation or Ruination. Do you believe that South Africa has the determination and the wherewithal to exploit its membership in BRICS strategically, or will this just be another lost opportunity to improve the lot of South Africans?
I think South Africa has a very golden opportunity in joining BRICS. Because, what we have here, BRICS is, the new rising economies that potentially may change the world. And South Africa is much smaller economically compared to these other BRIC partners, compared to China, compared to Russia, compared to Brazil or India. But potentially, I think the first positive thing that could come out of our joining BRICS is that because the BRICS economies are growing at such a high rate, that could actually pull us, it could give us the political will actually to be on the same par. Because, for now, the last couple of years, the big disappointment in South Africa has been that it appeared that we lack the political will, our leaders lack the political will to really push determinedly for economic growth, to lift our growth determinedly out of the sort of 1%, 2%, to where, the BRICS partners are, BRICS partners are 6% and above, China, double-digit figures often. So maybe because we are now part of this peer group, that maybe, by being part of the peer group and everybody else looking at us and wondering where we should belong there, that will give us the determination actually, to drive our economy much more determinedly to reach the same level as our peers.
Do you think the richer countries in the BRICS alliance will use their power to control BRICS initiatives? Why do you say this?
I think, the difficulty is in the BRICS relations. We've got, China, the Chinese economy compared to all of the other economies is really massive. So there's an unequal balance of power. So if you have, sort of a trade alliance with one country and, a massively big in terms of, economically compared to the others, you're always going to have, you're going to have problems. And the problem is going to be, two things. Will China, with its economic muscle, will it compromise on key, where you need not to compromise? And it would mean, in the weaker countries like South Africa and India and Russia, would they be able, with their small economies, can they persuade can they push for their strategic interests, against a really strong China? And that's going to be the real difficulty. I think from a South Africa point of view, what we have to do, in that kind of context, because we're the smallest economy, so we're going to have to make strategic partnership within BRICS, on strategic issues. If we could strike, for example, a better inner alliance with, say, with Brazil on an issue, and maybe on a different issue again with India and so on. So we're going to have to be really smart in the way we're going to work within this alliance.
Member countries in BRICS are in competition with one another. Can these countries work together effectively to promote the BRICS idea?
And that really is the difficulty for BRICS, because, the countries are allies and they're also competitors at the same time. And how they can bridge that kind of dilemma, that's going to be, the BRICS partners going to stand or fall on that. Can they get it right? So far they've been struggling, to manage this relationship of being a partner as well as a competitor. And I remain skeptical whether they could do it. If you just look at the past summits, on many issues has been postponed to other, rather than because they could not agree on really many critical issues, it's always been put forward. So we may actually see a situation, the worst case scenario, where issues are put forward all the time that they can't agree on, and if they can't overcome that, BRICS is going to be a talk show.
What can South Africa specifically gain from its BRICS membership?
Two very important things from a South African point of view. We are now seen as one of the big players, although we're very small. So that's of course a positive element. We also have now, in sort of international fora and international negotiations, we suddenly have really strong partners that can back us, and so on. So we're not alone. Those are the two positives. But you could also learn from these emerging market powers. We can learn, new ideas. I mean, the Chinese has been growing for the last 20 years at, between 8 and 10% annually. We can learn from, how do they do that? The Brazilians has been doing very well also, but within the context of a democracy. We can learn from that. Or even, the Indian democracy, the world's biggest developing country democracy. We can learn, from, their failures and their successes. So that's a really, we can learn almost in a very friendly way from our new partners. And of course, also there's also the possible risk for us. The risk for us, and I think one has to point it out, is that right now the whole world is looking towards Africa, for Africa's resources. The old industrial powers who are all struggling economically now, Europe or the US and so on, and all of them are looking at Africa, coming back to Africa to try to reboot their resources by using Africa's resources. The new emerging market economies, they're all really growing at really, at high levels, and for them to keep growing at that high levels, they also need Africa's resources. So almost, Africa has become now a new area of, of competition for resources. Now here is us, South Africa. For South Africa also to grow, Africa is our market. So we essentially going to be in direct competition between the new, for the African market, our competition with the old industrial powers and now also the BRIC partners. So, from our point of view, this is a potential lose situation. I mean, can we win in this really very tough race ahead of us? And I mean, from another point of view, we also have to watch out, from, being in a BRICS partnership, because every time we hear that China has invested in an African country and so on, we should be worried also, because it should be South Africa that should be doing it, and so on. And I'm just thinking about the South African currency. If you think about it, I mean, a lot of the research are now showing that in a number of years, the Chinese currency really is going to be one of the big currencies in Africa. Now it was supposed to be the South African currency. So we may be edged out in Africa, and if we are edged out in Africa, then the South African economy, it will be really in a crisis.
What are the pros of being in the alliance and why?
I mean, as I said, being in the alliance, it offers us, gives us a bigger weight when we negotiate in global forums. But also, I think more important, if you think of the last couple of, since 1994, when South Africa has entered in many of the trade negotiations, I mean, you think the European trade negotiations with the European Union, trade negotiations with the US and so on. And often in many of these trade negotiations, actually we came off the worst. I mean, if we analyze a lot of these negotiations, we struggled. And so on. I think now suddenly being part of the BRICS alliance, I think we will have much bigger clout now, in the sense that I think all of these potential, let's call it industrial powers, because we're part of BRICS now, I think they may give us much better terms now, because we now have alternatives. So just the fact that we have alternatives, really will give us that extra power and the extra flexibility, and better terms and negotiations, and so on. But I think also very importantly for us, if you think about it, all of the old industrial powers, they're struggling economically. So, and South Africa's major market has been the industrial world, the EU, North America, and so on. But because these economies are struggling, it's a problem for our exports, and it's a problem for the things that we're making, because we can't export it to those countries because they're struggling. But if now we have alternative partners, now we potentially have alternative markets now. Now we can actually, if we're clever enough, we can actually now export to other markets, to the BRICS markets and so on. So really, that's some of the pros for South Africa.
But it would also then create pressure on us to actually get the stuff to market.
Exactly. If South Africa can actually now start to behave economically much smarter. Because yes, we've got alternative markets, but we also have to get the things cleverly to those markets. We can to take away the bottlenecks in South Africa. We're going to have to, improve our infrastructure. We're going to have to do all of those kind of things. Now, for the last couple of years, unfortunately, we have been too slow in doing that. But if we now use, all of these new BRICS markets, and we use that as a catalyst to actually do the things that we were supposed to do, some time ago, then it would be good for South Africa.
What benefits could South Africa's membership in the BRICS alliance have for the African continent in general?
I think there's a lot of concern, actually, from other African countries about South Africa being part of BRICS, because, for them it's unknown. They don't know what's going on, and so on. So we're going to have to firstly explain to our African partners, the positive elements of BRICS and so on. But I think there's immediate potential benefits. I mean, if we, in partnership with our other African countries, if we jointly engage with BRICS, then we potentially offer our African partners also markets, the BRICS markets. So if we say to them, we're not going to go alone, we're not going to export alone, we're going to take you with us. And we're going to open the BRICS markets for you also, then that immediately is, of course, a positive thing for other African countries. And if we also can put pressure on our BRICS partners, to invest more in Africa, but not only investing more, investing in a way that will actually grow Africa and that won't strip Africa's resources.
That was author and analyst William Gumede discussing his latest book, South Africa in BRICS.